pre-calling, the grace you receive is unmerited. You didn't do anything to deserve it. It bears out also when we get to Ephesians. You'll see the exact same thing. You did not merit his calling you. You did not merit his deciding when and where to open your eyes and ears. There's no meriting. That's purely by his grace or favor. However, post-calling, all favor or grace is merited. You must merit it. So there's no change in the teaching per se. There's clarification, and so we'll have a deeper understanding. The Jewish community were enemies for your sake, but concerning the choice, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. Okay, in other words, they were enemies. In other words, they had messed up. And by enemies, they weren't enemies of you, the people, necessarily. When you were in transgression of the law, when you were in sin, you were at enmity, or your enemies, to the Creator. And because of that relationship, they were cast aside temporarily for a period of time to do what? He said, to allow for the coming in of the Gentiles. But he's saying, don't get all excited. Don't get all boastful about the fact that they messed it up. He said, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. Stop being all boastful because you're Gentiles and the Jews had messed it up. Stop being all boastful because you're Jewish and you were born into it and the Gentiles were all walking around doing all kinds of dumb things. You're both guilty. Nobody has a great leg to stand on here. But you're also both able to come in and graft together and be equal in Elohim. So there is no hierarchy by birthright. There's no hierarchy by, well, they blew it, we're better, blah, blah, blah. There's no hierarchy here. We're all children of Israel. Can you empty yourself? Oh, but I don't like that. Well, that's not an empty vessel right there. That's a vessel full of itself, not emptied itself. But I don't want to do that. Well, I don't like this, and I don't like that. And I have a different thought about how you do services, or how you do this, or how you do that. Or, by the way, why do we spend so much time doing this? Or, well, who made you boss? Empty yourself. Be a servant. Fit into the structure of Elohim. Do you have it in you? Do you have the heart? Not just the will. Will is a lot of talk in my point. You have to have the will also, but do you have the heart to commit unto death? See, why was David like a man like unto Yahweh's own heart? Because he had the heart for it. He showed it when he went up against Goliath. He showed it how he handled when he got called out for what happened with Bathsheba. He had the heart to be obedient unto death. But that's where we have a problem, is that everybody's thinking higher, more highly than they should, and so therefore nobody's under authority. Because you have to think like the mind of Messiah, that you will humble yourself, empty yourself to come under a structure. It takes emptying. Some of you sit there going, I am so tired of Rabbi talking about submission. I know some of you need to own that. You won't do it in front of me, though. But you have that problem. You don't want to submit. But guess what? If you can't submit to me, how are you submitting to him? By the way, you notice that in here, these are not quote-unquote spiritual gifts. These are just anointed gifts and talents and functions that you can do. This is not about, now, yes, there is prophecy and teaching in there, but what about the rest of it? It doesn't mention tongues. It doesn't mention all this other, like having a word of knowledge and a word of this and a word of that and all this other Christianese nonsense. We have a little bit of Korach in us. Yeah, I know I'm good at this listening thing or this serving thing, but I want to be the teacher. It doesn't matter what you want. He hasn't given you that talent. If you had the talent, you'd be doing it. You do what you're gifted in. You do it naturally because it's your gifting. You can't help yourself. You know why I have a congregation? Because Yahweh had mercy on all the people I was sharing all this stuff with who didn't really want to hear it. My wife will tell you, I wore people out. In which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the authority of the air, of the spirit that is now working the sons of disobedience. So you were doing this before, and it's still the spirit is working in those that are disobedient. You were not being disobedient when you were trespassing and sinning before you were called. Once you're called, though, is when you get to be disobedient. He's saying there are those of you that are still walking like you walked before, even though you now have been called and have your eyes open. Now you're being disobedient. You can't be disobedient until you know what to be obedient to. But this is explaining to you that in the situation, follow the context, you were dead in trespasses, you earned and deserved nothing but death. He, in an unmerited favor, in that level of grace, saved you, delivered you from that mess, and raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenlies in Messiah Yeshua.